When we reflect on the foundational component of a continuum of supports that's integral to collaborative response, we initially referred to this component as a pyramid of interventions. And really, it surfaced when we began engaging in our collaborative team meetings and seeing real power in the collaborative conversations we were having, the focus on students. Now we were bringing in data and evidence to help identify which students should we be talking about. It was surfacing different students for the conversation than we had in the past. But then we reached the point of, so what should we do? And sometimes that question would bring about pause. It would bring about, I'm not sure what we could do. And oftentimes for myself as a leader, I would be thinking, boy, I sure wish this person would have been in part of this conversation, because they have a really rich toolkit in regards to this particular conversation or student or issue that we're talking about. I wish they were here, or boy, I wish this team could have been part of yesterday's team conversation because a similar topic came up and some of the ideas that surfaced would have been really powerful to bring into this conversation. We were also getting to the point where when we would say, what should we do? Sometimes it felt like the same ideas were coming up and over. And, well, let's call the parent. Oh, we tried that. What if we tried something else? It often felt like we were having to brainstorm each and every time. And sometimes the brainstorm was surfacing some really thoughtful or innovative ideas. Sometimes it was replicating. Sometimes it was bringing up ideas that were not as impactful as others. Essentially, we wanted a place where we could say, what are we going to do? And instead of people going, they could go, have we tried this? What about this? Here's an idea. Basically, could we create a repository of our best strategies, accommodations, and interventions for consideration when talking about what do we do? What is the action to take away? So we initially referred to this creation of a master list. We affectionately refer to it as our menu or our placemat of supports. We referred to it initially as a pyramid of interventions. It was consistent with a lot of the language that was surfacing, especially with the early origins of response to intervention literature. In a lot of the professional learning communities literature, they were talking about this pyramid of interventions. It made sense. The idea that the interventions would become more intensified the higher we went, and that we would have less and less students at each one of those tiers. A pyramid made sense. However, what we found over time is that a pyramid is not really an accurate representation when we tier the supports. When we tier the students, absolutely, we want to see a pyramid type shape where the majority of our students are having success at the lower tiers and less students at the tip are needing the more intensive supports. But when we tier the supports, a pyramid doesn't make sense, because at tier 1, we want to narrow. We want to have a few non-negotiable best practices that we all agree that we will attend to within this continuum of supports. By tier 2, the supports that we could try for some students some of the time in some of our classrooms, that's where we see a bulge. There's a lot of things we could try that are not necessarily non-negotiable, but we know can have impact for students. And then our tier 3 supports provided by someone other than the classroom teacher. Tier 4 being those supports provided by someone external to the school. A pyramid didn't really make sense. It wasn't a clear representation of the shape. So the referral of it as a continuum made more sense as we flex and shift and add on supports for our students. And the idea of calling everything that we do an intervention also became misleading, because we know an intervention, when it's truly an intervention, it's teaching a specific skill that we want the students to be able to learn. It's done so in individualized or small group settings, and is provided by somebody who is trained with a high degree of fidelity. Well, not everything that we did matched that criteria of a true intervention. So the idea of referring to things as interventions or as strategies, things that could potentially work for a student, or as accommodations, the things we put in place to help overcome a current gap in skill, all of these things are powerful supports that we could put in place. So the idea in transition to a continuum of supports made sense. And also the understanding that we don't make the continuum of supports for our school, which is what we initially thought when we thought about building the pyramid of interventions. But we understand now that a continuum of supports is built in relation to a focus area. So within our school, we could have a literacy continuum of supports. We could have a well-being continuum of supports. We could have an engagement continuum of supports. Whatever our focus area is, that becomes that topic or focus for our continuum of supports. And in time, we may have multiple continuums established within our school to then just help continually inform the conversations around what do we do next. The continuum of supports is a foundational component to collaborative response that really helps in time complement and even challenge our classroom practice. What could we be considering when we think about how we collaboratively respond to the needs of our students?